Tonight, we set something down, the need to have every answer. There is a kind of tiredness that comes from always trying to know, to have the right response ready for every question life asks. Tonight, we let that go. We rest instead in something the Zen masters knew well, that peace does not come from having all the answers, but from no longer needing them. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. This evening we return to the words of the Buddha and the gentle wisdom of Zen. These teachings have been carried across many centuries, by many hands, because they speak to something human that has not changed in all that time. We will hear stories, the kind that have been told beside fires and on mountain paths for a very long time. You don't need to hold on to any of it. You do not need to remember a single word. Just let the teachings wash over you the way water moves over stone, taking their time, asking nothing. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. There is a line that has been passed down through the Zen tradition for many centuries. It goes like this: not knowing is most intimate. It comes from an exchange between two old Chan masters in China, and people have spent whole lifetimes sitting with it since. Not knowing is most intimate. It sounds backward at first. We tend to believe the opposite. We believe that knowing is what brings us close to life. That if we could only understand everything, name everything, file everything away in its proper place, then at last we would feel safe. We would feel at home. But these masters saw something different. They saw that the mind which insists on knowing is a mind held slightly apart from life, always measuring, always deciding, always one small step removed from the thing in front of it, busy turning that thing into a thought about the thing. And they saw that when we soften that grip, when we let ourselves simply not know, something tender opens. We come closer to the moment as it actually is, not as we have decided it must be. The Buddha spent his whole life pointing at the causes of our suffering, and among the deepest of them, he found this one: the grasping mind, the mind that cannot leave anything uncertain, the mind that must label and sort and conclude. There is great peace, he taught, in loosening that grip, not in knowing more, but in needing to know less. This is where we begin tonight, with the quiet relief of not knowing. Let us explore a story in this spirit. It is told of a young man, long ago, who set out to find a teacher, said to live high in the mountains. He had heard that this teacher held the deepest wisdom in all the land, and the young man was hungry for it. He had questions stacked upon questions. Why do we suffer? What happens when we die? What is the meaning of a human life? He carried these questions the way a merchant carries gold, clutched tight, afraid of losing them. The climb took many days. When at last he reached the small hut near the summit, he found an old man sitting quietly outside, watching the mist move through the valley below. The young man could hardly contain himself. He bowed and said, "Teacher, I have traveled very far. Please, tell me, what is the highest truth?" The old man looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "I do not know." The young man waited. Surely this was a test. Surely more would follow. But the old man simply returned his gaze to the valley. "You do not know?" The young man said. "But they told me you were the wisest teacher in all these mountains." "Perhaps they were mistaken," the old man said gently. the young man felt something close to anger rising in him. He had climbed for days. He had carried his questions like treasure. "Then what have you learned?" he asked, "in all your years up here?" The old man was quiet. The mist moved. A bird called somewhere down the slope. And then he said, "I have learned to say I do not know and to be at peace." The young man did not understand. Not then. He stayed on the mountain for a time, frustrated, waiting for the real teaching to begin. Each morning he would ask his questions, and each morning the old man would answer in the same way. "I do not know. Why do the seasons turn? I do not know. What becomes of us in the end? I do not know." At first this drove the young man nearly to despair. He had come for answers, and he was being given nothing. One morning he grew bold and said, "Teacher, if you know nothing, why do people climb all this way to sit with you?" The old man poured 2 cups of tea, slow and unhurried, and handed one across. "I do not know that either," he said. "Perhaps they come to learn that they too do not need to know. Drink your tea." The young man drank his tea. He had expected wisdom and was given only this: a warm cup in cold hands, on a quiet morning, high in the mountains. And yet he noticed, almost against his will, how good the tea tasted, how the warmth spread through his fingers, how still the morning was. He stayed on, and slowly, almost without noticing, something began to change in him. He found that he could not keep his questions sharp and urgent forever. In the presence of the old man's calm, they began to soften. They lost their edge. And as they softened, the young man began, for the first time in his life, to simply look. He saw the way the morning light came over the ridge. He felt the cold air on his face and the warmth of the fire at his back. He heard the wind in the pines, and he noticed that the wind asked nothing of him. It did not need to be understood. It was simply there, and he was there with it. One evening, as the two of them sat watching the last light fade from the valley, the young man said quietly, "I think I am beginning to understand." The old man smiled. "Then you are forgetting what I taught you." And the young man laughed, because he saw it now. The teaching was not an answer to be grasped. It was a grip to be released. He had come up the mountain clutching his questions like gold, and he was going back down with open hands. Not empty. Open. And there is a great difference between the two. This not knowing the young man discovered has a name in the Zen tradition. A Korean Zen master brought it to many students with a single phrase. He called it, "Don't know mind." A student would come to him full of questions, eager and anxious, hoping to be handed the truth. And he would smile and answer, "Don't know." "Where do you come from?" "Don't know." "Where are you going?" "Don't know." "Keep this don't know mind," he would tell them, "and you will be fine." At first it sounds almost like a joke, but there is something profound hidden inside it. For it is in the wanting to know, in the restless reaching for the answer, that we grow frustrated and confused. It is the reaching that pulls us out of the present moment and makes us miss what is right here in front of us. He was not refusing to help. He was offering the deepest help of all. He was showing his students how to set the burden down. It is not stupidity, this don't know mind, and it is not giving up. It is not the dull, slumped feeling of, I have no idea and I no longer care. It is something alive, right, even, It is the mind that stays open at the very edge of its knowing, willing to be surprised, willing to learn, willing to let the next moment be different from what it expected. Think for a moment about how early the opposite begins. How young we are when we first learn that there is supposed to be a right answer to everything. There is a memory many people carry from their school days. The textbook with the answers printed in the back. You would work through a problem, line after line, and when you could go no further, when you had truly given up, you would turn to those final pages and look. And there it was. The answer, clean and certain, as though it had been waiting there all along in some perfect place while you struggled in the dark. A child grows up with that image pressed gently into the mind. The belief that somewhere, for every question, there exists a correct answer. Not a guess. Not a maybe. The answer. And if only you were clever enough, or patient enough, or good enough, you could find it. You could turn to the back of the book of life and read the solution, and finally rest. It is a comforting picture, and it is a heavy one, because life, as it turns out, does not come with answers printed in the back. The questions that matter most, the ones that keep us awake, the ones about love and loss and what we are meant to do, these have no answer key. We turn to those final pages again and again, and we find them blank. And so we suffer, not because the answers are hidden from us, but because we keep believing they exist at all. We keep searching for a certainty that was never there to begin with. We treat the not knowing as a problem to be fixed, when all along it was simply the shape of a human life. To be here, in a vast and living world, without the final answer in hand, that is not a failure. That is the truth of our condition, and there is a deep rest available to us the moment we stop fighting it. The Buddha understood this longing very well. He saw that the mind grasps. It reaches out and tries to wrap itself around things, to hold them, to pin them down. We even speak this way. We say, "I just want to wrap my mind around it," as though understanding were a kind of grip, a way of closing our hands around something so it cannot get away. But some things are simply too large to be held. You cannot wrap your arms around the ocean. You cannot hold the sky. And much of life is like this. Far too vast, far too alive, to be caught and contained by our thinking. When we try anyway, when we squeeze and strain to make life fit inside our small certainties, we only tire ourselves. The grip itself becomes the suffering. There is a feeling that comes with this grasping. Perhaps you know it. A tightness behind the eyes, a clenching somewhere in the chest, the mind racing, turning a problem over and over, looking for the answer that will let it finally stop. We have all spent nights this way, lying awake, chewing on some worry, certain that if we could just think it through one more time, we would solve it. And the answer never comes. Only the tightness grows. And then, sometimes, something shifts. We grow tired enough, or we simply give up. We stop reaching. And in that moment of release, the tightness loosens. The breath comes easier. Nothing has been solved, and yet something has changed. We have stopped fighting. We have let the question be a question. This is what that Korean Zen master was pointing to, and the Buddha before him. That the relief we are looking for is not on the far side of knowing. It is here, in the willingness to not know. To set the problem down, not because we have conquered it, but because we no longer need to. When we hold tight to what we think we know, we stop seeing. We meet each new day already certain of what it contains. We meet each person already certain of who they are. And so we miss them. We miss the day, and we miss the person, because we are too busy consulting the answers we already wrote. But the one who does not need to know can actually see. He looks at the mountain and sees the mountain, not his idea of it. She looks at the one she loves and sees them fresh, as they are tonight, not as they were 10 years ago. This is why those old Chan masters said that not knowing is most intimate. Knowing holds the world at arm's length, measuring it. Not knowing draws it close. Consider how often our certainty about a person is the very thing that keeps us from truly seeing them. We decide who someone is, and then we stop looking. We have filed them away. Husband, neighbor, stranger, friend. And the living person in front of us, who is changing every day, who carries sorrows and hopes we know nothing of, disappears behind the label we have given. Our knowing becomes a wall. To not know a person, to meet them with fresh and open eyes, is to let them be real again. To let them surprise us. This is a gift we can give to everyone we meet, simply by holding our certainty a little more loosely. The third patriarch of Zen, a master named Senkan, left behind a poem that has been treasured for more than 1,000 years. In it he writes, "Stop talking and thinking, and there is nothing you will not be able to understand." It is a curious thing to say. We are taught that understanding comes from thinking harder, from talking it through, from turning the problem over and over until it cracks. But Senkan pointed in the other direction, toward stillness, toward quiet. And if you look back on your own life, you may find this is true. The deepest understandings, the moments when something finally became clear, did they come while you were straining for them? Or did they come in the quiet afterward? On a walk, or washing the dishes, or in the soft moment just before sleep, when you had finally stopped trying? So often the answer arrives only once we have stopped chasing it. The mind, when it grasps, grows tight, and a tight mind cannot see far. But a mind at ease, a mind with space in it, lets wisdom move through like light through an open window. This does not mean we throw away our thinking. Thinking is a fine tool, and we need it. But it is a tool, not a master. There are times to use it, and there are times to set it gently down. The trouble comes when we cannot put it down. When the mind grinds on and on, long after it has done all it can do, chewing at a question that has no answer, refusing to rest. In those moments, the teaching is simple. Notice the grinding. Notice the tightness. And let that very tightness be the signal. Not a signal to think harder, but a signal to stop. To breathe. To return to what is actually here, in this moment, which the racing mind had carried you away from. So this is where we begin. Not with a new answer to collect, but with permission to not know. To turn to the back of the book and find it blank, and to feel, instead of fear, a strange and growing peace. If even the wisest teachers, the ones who climbed the highest mountains, could sit at the end of their long lives and say honestly, "I do not know," then surely we can let ourselves rest there too. We do not have to solve everything tonight. We do not have to solve anything at all. We can simply set down the heavy bag of questions we have been carrying and notice how light our hands feel without it. Open hands. not empty, open. Let us rest here a moment. Notice how you are feeling right now, without needing to name it or fix it. There is nothing here to figure out. We will go on together soon. When we stop chasing the answer, a question arises on its own. If I am not always searching, always trying to figure things out, then what do I do instead? Where does the mind rest when it finally stops running? The Zen tradition has an answer, and it is a surprising one. The mind rests by becoming empty. This emptiness is not a barren, lifeless thing. It is more like an open bowl, ready to receive whatever the moment brings. There is a phrase the Zen teachers use for this. They call it beginner's mind. A beginner does not arrive full of conclusions. He arrives curious, awake, ready to be shown. And there is a teaching that says the mind should be like an empty rice bowl. If the bowl is already full, nothing more can be put into it. If it is empty, it can hold anything. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the mind of the so-called expert, who is certain he already knows, there are very few. This is the resting place. It is a wakeful openness, alert and alive, rather than dull or sleepy. And from that openness comes a kind of peace that the busy knowing mind can never quite reach. This openness is rare in us. By the time we are grown, we have met 1,000 sunrises, and so we believe we know what a sunrise is. We have spoken with the same person 1,000 times, and so we believe we know who they are. The mind files everything away and stops looking closely. The beginner has no such files. To the beginner, the sunrise is happening for the first time, because in truth, it is. No morning has ever happened before. This one is brand new, and it will never come again. The one who can meet it with empty hands gets to actually see it. The one whose hands are full of yesterday sees only a memory laid over the present and misses the living thing entirely. There is a difficulty hidden here though, and the Buddha named it long ago. Even when we begin to let go of needing answers, the mind finds something else to grasp. It grasps at how things feel. When a moment is pleasant, we clutch at it and beg it to stay. When a moment is unpleasant, we push against it and beg it to leave. And in this endless reaching toward the good and shoving away of the bad, we lose our rest all over again. Let us explore a story about this. It concerns a young woman who lived in a fishing village by the sea long ago, and who longed more than anything to find a steady peace within herself. Her days were full and busy, and her mind was busier still, forever rehearsing what had gone wrong and worrying over what might come. She had heard that an old fisherman at the edge of the village had found a deep and lasting calm, the kind that did not waver whether the catch was good or poor, whether the seas were kind or rough. And so she went to him and asked him to teach her how to sit quietly and settle her restless mind. He was an unhurried man, weathered by years of sun and salt, and he did not make a great ceremony of it. He showed her how to sit on the sand at dawn, facing the water, and simply watch her breath come and go. That is all, he told her. Sit and breathe and let things be as they are. You do not have to make anything happen. She tried, and after a week she came back to him, troubled and a little ashamed. I have been doing, as you said, she told him, but it is awful. My mind will not be still. It jumps everywhere, to the market, to old arguments, to 100 small chores. My back aches from sitting. Some mornings I nearly fall asleep where I sit, and other mornings I am so restless I want to leap up and run down the beach. This sitting is hopeless. I think I am simply no good at it." The old fisherman listened, mending his net all the while, his fingers moving without hurry. When she had finished, he nodded slowly and said only, "It will pass." The young woman was not sure what he meant, but she went back to her sitting. And she kept at it, morning after morning, watching the grey light turn gold over the water, listening to the small waves fold onto the shore. Then one morning, everything changed. As she sat, a deep stillness came over her. Her breath grew slow and easy. The aching in her back melted away. Her thoughts settled like silt sinking to the bottom of a clear pond. She felt wide and calm and full of light, more peaceful than she had ever felt in her life. It was wonderful. She could hardly wait to tell the old man. She hurried to where he sat by his boat and said, breathless, "It worked. This morning my mind was perfectly still. I felt such peace, such joy. Everything was clear and bright. This is what I have been searching for. This is wonderful." The old fisherman looked up from his net, and his eyes were kind. He nodded slowly, and he said again, "It will pass." And it did. The next morning the restlessness returned, and the aching, and the wandering mind. But this time the young woman did not despair, because at last she understood what the old man had been showing her all along. The bad mornings would pass, and the good mornings would pass too. Her task was not to chase the good and flee the bad. Her task was simply to sit, and to let each morning be what it was, without grabbing and without pushing away. The peace she had been looking for was not in any single state of mind. It was in the willingness to let all of them come and go. This is one of the great sayings of the Buddha. He taught that all things are impermanent. Everything that arises also passes away. Our joys, our sorrows, our restless thoughts, our moments of perfect calm, all of them are like clouds moving across an open sky. They form, they drift, they dissolve. None of them stays. We suffer when we forget this. We find a good feeling, and we try to nail it to the floor so it can never leave. But feelings are not made to be nailed down. The harder we clutch at a happy moment, the faster it seems to slip through our fingers, and the more we ache when it goes. And when a hard feeling comes, we brace against it and wish it gone, which only seems to dig it in deeper. This grasping is so constant that we hardly notice it. A pleasant taste, and already we want another bite. A kind word, and already we are anxious. It will not come again. Even our happiness becomes a worry, because the moment we have it, we begin to fear its loss. So the mind is rarely at peace even in its good moments, because it is too busy trying to hold them still. And in its hard moments, it is at war. Either way, it does not rest. The Buddha saw that this restless grasping, this constant leaning toward what we want and away from what we do not, is the very engine of our suffering. The feelings themselves come and go on their own. It is our refusal to let them that does the damage. But the sky does not grab at its clouds, and it does not fight them either. It simply lets them pass through. The clouds gather and darken and break apart, and the sky remains wide and untouched. The Buddha pointed to a peace like that, a peace that does not depend on the weather of the mind, a peace that is there underneath all the passing states, if only we stop clinging long enough to notice it. There is something deeply restful in this. It means you do not have to fix your mood tonight. You do not have to force yourself into calm. Whatever you are feeling right now, pleasant or unpleasant, or somewhere in between, you can let it be here, knowing it will move along in its own time. You need not hold the door shut against it, and you need not chase after it as it leaves. Here is where the openness we spoke of becomes a true place of rest. When we no longer need each moment to be a certain way, we no longer have to brace ourselves against life. We can soften. We can let the moment be uncertain, unfinished, unresolved, and we can be at ease inside it anyway. Think of how much of our tiredness comes not from life itself, but from our resistance to it. We meet the day already braced, already certain it should be other than it is. We carry a heavy bundle of opinions about how everything ought to go, and we grow exhausted defending that bundle against a world that keeps refusing to obey it. The mind that knows exactly how things should be is a mind perpetually at war with how things are. But the empty bowl is at war with nothing. It does not insist. It receives. When life pours in sweetness, it holds the sweetness. When life pours in something harder, it holds that too, trusting that this will also pass. This is not weakness or giving up. It takes a quiet strength to stay open, to keep from slamming shut the moment things stop going our way. Yet that openness is where the deep rest lives. There is a wall we build without realizing it, made of all our certainties about how the world is and how people are, and how this day will surely go. We think the wall protects us. In truth, it only shuts us in, alone with our expectations, unable to be touched by the living moment on the other side. To set down a little of our certainty is to take down a few stones from that wall, and to feel the open air move through again. Picture someone who wakes already sure the day will be difficult. The bread is a little burnt, and this confirms it. A neighbor passes without speaking, and this confirms it too, though the neighbor was simply lost in her own thoughts and never saw him. By evening, he is certain he was right all along, that it was indeed a miserable day. But he was not living the day at all. He was only collecting evidence for a verdict he had reached before it even began. His certainty wrote the whole story in advance, and then his eyes searched only for the lines that matched. How different that day might have been met with empty hands, with no verdict prepared, open to whatever it actually held. The burnt bread is just burnt bread. The quiet neighbor is just a person thinking her own thoughts. Without the wall of certainty laid over them, these small things lose their sting, and the day is free to be whatever it truly is. So when the mind asks what it should do instead of searching, the answer turns out to be simple. Let things arise. Let things pass. Hold the good lightly, knowing it will go. Meet the hard gently, knowing it will go as well. There is a famous exchange in the Zen tradition in which a student asks his teacher about the secret of a life awake, expecting some grand and complicated reply. The teacher answers with only a handful of plain words. When hungry, eat. When tired, rest. That is the whole of it. To meet each moment as it is, fully, without dragging the last moment behind us or reaching ahead for the next. There is no trick to learn here, and nothing to master. There is only a softening, a willingness to let life be the changing, moving, uncertain thing it has always been, and to rest in the middle of it like the wide sky rests in the middle of its passing clouds. The young woman by the sea spent many more mornings on the sand, through calm days and restless ones, and slowly she came to trust the rhythm of it. The peace she found in the end was not the bright, perfect stillness of that one golden morning. It was something steadier and humbler. It was the peace of no longer needing the morning to be any particular way at all. Years later, it is said, younger people from the village would come and ask her how to find the calm she so plainly carried. And she would tell them what the old fisherman had told her, the same 3 small words, though by then she understood them in her bones. Whatever troubles you, it will pass. Whatever delights you, that will pass as well. You need not be the keeper of your moods, holding some and banishing others. You need only sit with them as they move through, the bright ones and the dark ones alike, the way the shore receives each wave and then lets it slide back out to sea. Nothing has to be held. Nothing has to be chased. There is a great relief in this and a great freedom. Let us be still for a moment. Whatever feeling is here with you now, let it stay or let it go, as it pleases. It will move along in its own time, and so will we when the moment feels right. Now we come to the heart of why we cling so tightly in the first place. The Buddha gave one of the clearest answers ever offered to the question of human unhappiness. He taught that suffering does not come from the world being a certain way. It comes from our grasping, from the clenched hand that will not open. And he pointed to 4 things in particular that we grasp, 4 kinds of holding on that quietly cause us pain. The first is our grasping after pleasant things. The sights and sounds and tastes we chase, always reaching for the next sweetness, never quite satisfied. We finish one pleasure and immediately want another, and the wanting never rests for long. The second is our grasping after our own way of doing things, our rituals and routines and methods, the conviction that our path is the right path and all others are mistaken. The Buddha noticed how fiercely people defend their particular form of religion, their particular practice, certain that theirs alone is correct, as though the truth could belong to one group and no other. The third is the deepest and most hidden of all, our grasping after the idea of who we are, the fixed picture of ourselves we defend against every challenge. And the fourth, the one we will sit with tonight, is our grasping after our views and opinions, our certainty that we are right. Of all 4, this last is perhaps the one that troubles our days most often, and the one we notice least. The grasping after pleasure, at least, we can see in ourselves. The grasping after opinion hides behind a respectable mask. We do not call it grasping. We call it being right. We call it standing up for the truth. And so it goes unexamined, working away beneath the surface, stealing our peace, while we congratulate ourselves for having principles. Consider how it feels to be certain you are right. There is a kind of heat to it, a tightening. Someone says something you disagree with, and at once something rises in the chest, a pressure, a readiness to argue. The body braces. The mind sharpens its case. We rarely call this suffering, but suffering is what it is. That heat is not peace. That bracing is not rest. The Buddha saw that our opinions are among the heaviest things we carry, precisely because we so rarely set them down. We will defend a view long past the point of usefulness. We will lose sleep over being right. We have all known the strange misery of an argument that will not leave us, replaying it hours later, sharpening the clever thing we wish we had said. The disagreement itself may have been small, but our grip on being right turns it into a stone we carry for days. There are words attributed to the Buddha that cut straight to this. He spoke of the person who is free, who does not cling to views and opinions, and he said something gently humorous about the rest of us. Those who grasp after views and opinions, he said, wander about the world annoying people. It is a teaching with a smile in it. We picture the man who is always right, always correcting, always ready with his opinion whether anyone asked for it or not. And we recognize him, perhaps a little uncomfortably, because we have all been him. We have all gone wandering about, bothering people with our certainties, sure that we were helping, sure that we were simply telling the truth. There is something freeing in seeing it put so plainly. The Buddha is not scolding us. He is showing us, with great kindness and a little humor, how the grasping mind makes us tiresome to others and exhausting to ourselves. The one who must always be right is rarely a peaceful presence. People grow careful around him. They choose their words, they hold back, they wait for the inevitable correction. And he, for his part, never quite understands why others seem to keep their distance, why conversations stiffen when he enters. He has built his loneliness, one opinion at a time, and called it being principled. Contrast him with the person who has loosened that grip. There is an ease around such a person. You can disagree with her and feel no danger in it. You can say something foolish and not be pounced upon. She listens, she considers, she is genuinely curious about how you see things. Being near her is restful because she is not braced for battle, not waiting to win. The Buddha is pointing toward this second kind of presence and showing us that it is available to anyone willing to open the hand. Let us explore a story about two scholars who lived long ago in a city famous for its learning. Both were brilliant. Both had spent their lives in study, and both were widely admired. But they could not stand each other, for they disagreed deeply about a question of philosophy, and each was certain the other was a fool. For many years they quarreled. Whenever they met at a gathering, the air would grow tense, and before long they would be locked in argument, their voices rising, the other guests falling silent around them. Each went home from these encounters worn out and bitter, nursing his grievance, polishing his next argument. One would lie awake, composing the perfect reply. The other would rehearse, on his evening walk, the precise words that would finally expose his rival's error before the whole city. Neither ever changed his mind. Neither ever could, because winning had become more important than understanding. The question they argued over, which had once been a beautiful and living thing, had hardened into a weapon each used against the other. In time, people stopped inviting them to the same gatherings. Their students took sides. The disagreement that had begun as an honest difference between two thoughtful men spread outward and soured many friendships. And still neither scholar could let it go, because to let it go would feel like losing, and losing was the one thing each could not bear. One of the scholars grew old, and as he lay near the end of his long life, a former student came to sit with him. The student expected to find his teacher at peace, surrounded by the fruits of a celebrated career. Instead, he found an old man still troubled, still turning over the same arguments, still muttering about his old rival across the city. "Teacher," the student said gently, "you have spent your whole life proving you were right. Has it brought you what you hoped?" The old scholar was quiet for a long while. His eyes moved to the window, to the rooftops of the city he had lived in all his days. Then he said, "I have won 1,000 arguments. I cannot remember a single one that brought me an hour of peace. And the man I argued with all these years, my great enemy, I am told he lies ill across the city, as old and as tired as I am. We have spent our lives as mirrors of each other, each making the other miserable. I no longer even remember why it mattered so much. I remember only that it did, and that it cost me a great deal. The student carried those words away with him, and he never forgot them. For he saw in his old teacher a truth the Buddha had taught long before. We imagine our opinions are about the world. We think we are defending the truth. But so often we are only defending ourselves, our pride, our need to be the one who is right. And in doing so, we build a wall between ourselves and everyone who sees things differently, which is to say, between ourselves and nearly everyone. Let us be honest about how this works in us. When we cling to a view, we are not usually clinging to it because we have weighed all the evidence and found it sound. We are clinging because it has become ours. It has become part of who we take ourselves to be. To question the view feels like questioning the self. And so we defend it as we would defend our own body, with heat and urgency, long after the question itself has stopped mattering. This is the third grasping, the grasping after self, hiding quietly underneath the fourth. We fight for our opinions because we have mistaken them for us. There is a great freedom waiting on the other side of this. The Buddha described the person who has set down this grasping as someone untroubled, at ease, no longer made arrogant by holding a view and no longer wounded when a view is challenged. Such a person can hear a different opinion without the heat rising. He can even hear that he was wrong and feel not loss but a kind of relief, because he was never holding on to being right in the first place. Imagine how light the days become without the constant labor of defending yourself. Imagine meeting someone who disagrees with you and feeling curious rather than threatened. This is not a fantasy. It is simply what remains when the grasping falls away. None of this means we throw away all our views and believe in nothing. That is not the teaching. The Buddha was not asking us to become empty-headed, to have no sense of right and wrong, to drift without conviction. A person with no views at all is not free. He is merely lost. The teaching is subtler and kinder than that. It asks us to hold our views the way you might hold a small bird in your hands. Closed enough that it does not escape, open enough that you do not crush it. We can have our understanding, our sense of what is true and good, and we can hold it without that white-knuckled grip. We can believe something fully and still leave a little room, a little opening, for the possibility that we do not see the whole picture. There is a difference between conviction and clinging. Conviction can be calm. It can act in the world with strength and clarity, and still listen, still soften, still learn. Clinging cannot. Clinging must win. Clinging grows hot and frightened the moment it is questioned, because its whole life depends on being right. The Buddha's path runs between these two. Not the limp surrender of having no views, and not the hard grip of clinging to them, but something alive in the middle. To care deeply about what is true, and to hold it with an open hand. You can feel the difference in your own body if you watch closely. When conviction speaks, there is a steadiness to it, a groundedness, like standing firmly on the earth. When clinging speaks, there is a tightness, a rising heat, a fear underneath the certainty. The same opinion can be held either way. One person says what he believes and remains at ease whether you agree or not. Another says the very same thing and cannot rest until you have surrendered to him. The words may match, The state of the heart could not be more different. And it is the state of the heart, not the rightness of the view, that determines whether we suffer. When we begin to loosen our grip on being right, something unexpected happens. Other people stop being opponents. The person who disagrees with us is no longer a threat to be defeated, but simply another mind, seeing from another place, with their own reasons and their own history. We can be curious about them. We can ask what they see that we do not. And in that curiosity, the loneliness of always defending ourselves begins to dissolve. The two old scholars in our story spent their whole lives certain they were enemies, but they were never truly so different. They were two men who loved the truth and grew so attached to their picture of it that they lost the very peace that truth was meant to bring. Had either one been able to open his hand, even a little, they might have become the closest of friends, two seekers walking toward the same light from different sides. Instead, they spent their years as adversaries and arrived at the end tired and alone, each still clutching an opinion that had given him nothing but heat. So perhaps tonight we can begin, in some small way, to open the hand, to notice the heat when it rises, the urge to be right, the bracing in the chest, and to let it soften. We do not have to win tonight. We do not have to be right about anything at all. We can let our certainties rest and feel how much lighter we are without their weight. Let the shoulders drop now and the jaw soften. For this little while, there is no one to convince and nothing to be right about. Rest in that ease. We will carry on in a moment. There is a question we ask ourselves 100 times a day, usually without noticing. Why? Why do I feel this way? Why did she say that? Why did this happen? The mind is forever reaching for the single reason behind things, certain that if it could just name the cause, it would understand, and the understanding would bring relief. The Buddha looked closely at this habit, and he taught something that can gently loosen its grip on us. The causes of what we feel, he saw, are far more tangled than we ever imagine. A single feeling can rise from many different streams at once. And to insist on one tidy answer is to overshoot what we can truly know. Let us explore a story about this. In an old town, there once lived a traveler who fell ill while passing through and was taken to rest in the home of a kindly family. They sent for the healers of the town, and 3 of them came, each one learned and respected, each one certain of his craft. The first healer examined the traveler and spoke with great confidence. "This is plainly a sickness of the body's heat," he said. "He has too much fire in him. I have seen it many times. The cure is cooling herbs and rest in the shade." He was quite sure. The second healer shook his head. "You are mistaken, my friend. This has nothing to do with heat. Look at the season. The cold winds have come early this year, and half the town is coughing. He has taken a chill from the weather. He needs warmth and broth and a fire by his bed." The third healer disagreed with them both. "Neither of you sees clearly. I spoke with the people who brought him in. This man has been walking for many days, sleeping little, eating poorly, pushing himself far too hard. His sickness comes from how he has been living. He needs nothing but good food and a long deep rest." The 3 of them began to argue, each defending his single answer, their voices rising in the small room, while the poor traveler lay there listening, no better for any of it. At last, an old woman who had been quietly tending the fire spoke up. She was no famous healer, only someone who had cared for many sick people over a long life, and the three learned men fell silent, a little surprised, when she began. "You may each be right," she said, "and that is just the trouble. Look at him. He is worn thin from his long walking, so what this one says is true. And the cold winds did come early, and he slept out under them, so this one is right as well. And a body worn down by hard travel and chilled by cold winds will often grow feverish and hot, so the first of you is not wrong either. You are each holding one thread and calling it the whole cloth. But the man before us is no riddle with a single answer. He is tired and chilled and worn down all at once. These troubles have braided together into the single knot we see." The healers looked at one another, and slowly their certainty drained away, and with it their need to win. They stopped arguing. Together, guided by the old woman, they gave the traveler warmth and broth and quiet and many days of rest. And in time he grew well. No single cure had saved him, for no single cause had felled him. It was the letting go of their certainties and the willingness to tend the whole person that made the difference. The three healers were never quite the same afterward. Each had spent years sure that his own way of seeing was complete, and each had discovered, in that small room, how partial his seeing truly was. The first had looked and seen only heat. The second had looked at the very same man and seen only cold. The third had seen only exhaustion. Three careful, learned men, all looking at one traveler and each catching a single thread. None of them had been lying. None had even been wrong exactly. They had simply each mistaken their corner of the truth for the whole of it. And it took someone with no reputation to defend, no cleverness to prove, to see the man plainly and whole. This is just what the Buddha was pointing to. When someone once came to him insisting that everything a person feels must come from one source alone, he gently disagreed, and he named a whole list of the streams that feed our experience. Some of what we feel comes from the body and its small disturbances, the imbalances within us that we are often unaware of. Some comes from changes in the weather and the seasons, the heat or the cold pressing on us. Some comes simply from the passing of time and the body growing weary. Some comes from how we have been living, whether carelessly or with care. Some comes from things that simply happen to us, the bumps and knocks of an ordinary life. And some, yes, from the deeper workings of cause and effect that the tradition calls karma. But karma was only one stream among many, and to blame everything on it alone, the Buddha said, is to overshoot what we can actually know. How ordinary most of these causes are. We might expect a great teacher to speak only of lofty things, of fate and merit, and the deep turning of the soul. Instead, the Buddha speaks of the body, of the weather, of tiredness, of accidents. He sets the grand and the humble side by side and gives no special weight to the grand. A feeling that troubles us might rise from the deepest currents of our life, or it might rise from a cold wind and an empty stomach. Both are honored. Both are real. And we are not wise enough, he suggests, to always tell which is which. This is a teaching about humility, about how little we truly understand of why things are as they are. See how quick we are to decide the reason for someone's behavior. A friend passes you on the street and does not smile. At once, the mind produces an explanation, and it is rarely a kind one. She is angry with me. I must have done something. She has decided she does not like me. By evening you have built an entire story, and you half believe it, and it sits heavy in your chest. But consider how many streams might have fed that single moment. Perhaps she slept poorly and her head aches. Perhaps she had hard news that morning and is lost in worry. Perhaps the sun was in her eyes and she simply did not see you. Perhaps her thoughts were 1,000 miles away. Perhaps her feet hurt, or she is hungry, or she is turning over some trouble of her own that has nothing whatsoever to do with you. The mind seizes on the one explanation that wounds us most and treats it as certain, when in truth a dozen gentler reasons are at least as likely. The Buddha's teaching invites us to pause right there, in the gap before we are sure. To remember that we are seeing only the surface, and that beneath any moment runs a current of causes we cannot see. This is not a call to figure out the real reason. It is a release from needing to. When we accept that we cannot know exactly why, the heavy story loses its grip, and something in us can soften toward the other person and toward ourselves. And notice which explanation the mind reaches for first. It almost always chooses the one that places us at the center. She did not smile because of me. He was short because of something I did. We make ourselves the cause of other people's moods, as though we were the sun around which their feelings turn. But most of the time we are barely in their thoughts at all. They are walking through their own day, carrying their own weather, and we have simply crossed their path at a moment that had nothing to do with us. There is a strange relief in realizing how little of other people's behavior is actually about us. It lifts a great weight of imagined offense from our shoulders. We are all a little like those 3 healers. We meet a feeling or an event, and we grab for the one explanation, and then we defend it. But life rarely arranges itself so neatly. Our moods especially are fed by more streams than we ever guess. A heaviness settles over an afternoon, and we search at once for the emotional reason, the deep meaning, the thing we must fix. Sometimes there is such a reason, but often the heaviness has crept in from somewhere far humbler. We did not sleep enough. We have not eaten in too long. The day is grey and the light is thin. We have been sitting too long, or carrying too much, or holding our breath without knowing it. There is a great kindness in remembering this. When a low mood arrives, before we interrogate our whole life for the cause, we might first ask the simple questions. Am I tired? Am I hungry? Have I been outdoors? Have I rested? So much of what feels like a crisis of the soul turns out, on closer look, to be the body asking for care. The Buddha, for all the depth of his teaching, did not float above such things. He spoke plainly of the body and its weathers, of how our feelings rise from ordinary sources as much as from grand ones. There is something steadying in that. It means we need not always go digging for some hidden wound. Sometimes the kindest thing is to eat and rest, and let the grey afternoon be a grey afternoon, knowing it will brighten. How often have we treated a passing mood as though it were the truth about our whole life? On a tired evening, everything looks bleak. Our worries seem larger, our hopes seem thinner, and we are sure, in that moment, that we are seeing clearly at last. Then we sleep, and we wake, and the world has quietly rearranged itself into something far more bearable. Nothing in our circumstances changed overnight. Only the streams feeding the feeling shifted. The exhaustion drained away, and the bleakness drained away with it. If we could remember, in the heavy hour, that the heaviness is fed by causes that will pass, we would take its dark pronouncements far less seriously. The tired mind is a poor judge of a life, and yet we hand it the gavel again and again. The deepest part of this teaching is the humility at its center. The Buddha himself, when he was once asked whether he knew everything, said no. He did not claim to see every cause of everything. He said the full workings of cause and effect were among the matters too vast for any mind to trace completely, and that to chase after them endlessly would lead only to confusion and distress. If even he, with all his wisdom, would not claim to know exactly why each thing unfolds as it does, then surely we can set down our own certainty more lightly. This is a quiet relief once we feel it. So much of our tiredness comes from the effort of explaining, from needing every why answered before we can rest. But we are small creatures in a vast and intricate world, and most of what moves through it moves beyond our seeing. The currents that shape a single afternoon are more than we will ever fully count. And we do not have to count them. We can let the river be a river, fed by its many hidden streams, and we can stop standing on the bank demanding to know the source of every ripple. When we meet another person's hard moment, this humility becomes compassion. We do not know what they are carrying. We never fully do. The sharp word, the cold silence, the turned shoulder, all of it rises from streams we cannot see, from a whole life of causes hidden beneath the surface. To remember this is to soften. It becomes far harder to take offense and far easier to be gentle when we truly accept how little we know of what runs beneath another's day. Pause here a little while. Whatever you are feeling this evening, you need not trace it to its source or explain it to yourself. Let it simply be, fed by its many quiet streams. There is no hurry to move on. Pain comes to every life. This is the first thing the Buddha ever taught, and he did not soften it. To be alive is to meet difficulty, loss, discomfort, the thousand small aches of an ordinary day, and the larger sorrows that visit us all. None of us escapes this. But the Buddha saw something else, something that offers real freedom. He saw that most of our suffering is not the pain itself. It is what we add to the pain afterward. He described it with a simple picture. Imagine a person struck by an arrow. That is painful, plainly. But then imagine that person, lying there, struck by a second arrow in the very same spot. The second wound hurts far more than the first. And the Buddha said that when difficulty comes to us, we are like someone who, having been struck once by life, picks up a second arrow and drives it into the wound ourselves. The first arrow is the thing that happened. The second arrow is everything the mind does with it. The blame, the why, the endless turning it over, the story we build about what it means and whose fault it is and what it says about us. The first arrow we often cannot avoid. The second one, the Buddha taught, is entirely our own doing, and so it is entirely within our power to set down. You can see this clearly in the small troubles of a day. Something spills, or a plan falls through, or a careless word reaches your ear. The event itself takes only a moment, and then it is over. The cup is broken, the rain has come, the word has been said. That is the first arrow, and often it is quite small. But then the mind takes hold of it. For the next hour, the next day, we replay it. We rehearse what we should have done. We build the case against whoever is to blame. We let a small spill become a long brooding, a single word become a wound we tend for a week. The original event was a pebble. By the time the mind has finished with it, we are carrying a boulder. And every ounce of that weight beyond the first small moment, we added ourselves. This is not to say we should feel nothing. Real losses deserve real grief, and the Buddha never taught us to harden ourselves against life. The first arrow is real, and we are meant to feel it. The teaching points only at the second arrow, the one made entirely of thought, the suffering we manufacture and then mistake for the situation itself. Much of that second arrow is made of a single thing: judgment. The restless need to decide who is to blame, to weigh and measure and assign fault, our own or someone else's. A hard thing happens, and almost before we have felt it, the mind is racing to assign responsibility. It must have been his carelessness. It must have been my foolishness. Someone, somewhere, must be at fault, and the mind will not rest until it has found them. The Buddha spoke directly to this. He once counseled a close student with words that have lasted across the centuries. "Do not be the judge of people," he said. "Do not make assumptions about others." He understood that this judging mind, forever weighing the worth and the fault of everyone around it, is a heavy burden to carry, and that it quietly poisons our peace. When we appoint ourselves judge over others, we are never off duty. Every person we meet becomes a case to be decided, and the gavel we hold over them, we hold over ourselves as well. For the habit of judging others and the habit of judging ourselves are the same habit, only turned in different directions. The person who is harsh and quick to condemn the people around him is almost always just as harsh with himself, behind closed doors. And the one who learns to meet others with understanding tends, in time, to grow gentler toward himself too. The two soften together because they were never really separate. Let us explore a story about this. In a quiet village long ago, there lived a man who kept to himself. He spoke little, rarely joined the gatherings, and walked the long way around to avoid the busy market. He tended a small garden behind his house and was seldom seen otherwise. The villagers did not know what to make of him, and so, as people do, they decided. He was proud, they said. He thought himself above them. He was cold, unfriendly, a man with no love in his heart. Why else would he keep apart from honest folk? Mothers told their children to leave him be. Some said he must have done something shameful in his past. Others said he simply had a hard and joyless nature. The story of his coldness passed from house to house, growing a little with each telling, until everyone simply knew it to be true, though not one of them had ever truly spoken with him. The village was comfortable in its judgment. There was even a kind of pleasure in it, the small warmth people feel when they agree together that someone else is lesser. The quiet man became a useful figure in their conversations, an example of what not to be. And the more they spoke of him this way, the more solid the story grew, until it would have seemed almost foolish to question it. This is how judgments harden. Repeated often enough, among enough people, an assumption takes on the weight of fact. One winter, a great storm came down on the village in the night. The wind tore at the roofs, and the river rose, and the cold was fierce. And in the dark and the chaos, it was the quiet man who was seen moving from house to house, carrying the old and the young to higher ground, returning again and again into the storm, asking nothing, saying nothing, until everyone was safe. In the grey light of morning, the villagers found him resting at last, soaked through and exhausted, and they finally came to understand how wrong they had been. For he was not proud, and he was not cold. Some years before, in another place, he had known a great sorrow and lost those he loved most dearly, and the grief had made him quiet. He kept to himself not out of contempt, but because his heart was tender and sore, and the noise of crowds was more than he could bear. All those years the village had been certain it knew him, and all those years it had known nothing at all. How easily we do this. We take a few visible scraps of a person, a manner, a silence, a single choice, and from them we construct an entire character, and then we forget that we constructed it. The story feels like simple fact. We do not say, "I have imagined that this person is unkind." We say, "That person is unkind," as though we had read it in the great book of truth. And then we treat them accordingly, and our coldness invites coldness in return, and the story seems confirmed, when really we were only watching our own assumption come back to us. The Buddha's counsel cuts through all of this. We are not the judges of one another, because we cannot see what we would need to see in order to judge truly. We see the surface. We do not see the loss that made someone quiet, the fear beneath the sharp word, the long and private struggle behind a single failing. We never see the whole. To pass judgment on a person from the little we can see is to mistake a glimpse for the entire life. There is enormous relief in laying this burden down. Imagine moving through your days without the constant labor of assessing everyone, ranking them, deciding who has earned your approval and who deserves your scorn. Imagine meeting people simply as they are in the moment, without the heavy file of verdicts you usually carry. The judging mind tells us it is keeping us safe, sorting friend from foe. Mostly it just keeps us tense and apart, walled off from people we have condemned without trial. To set the gavel down is to let others approach again, and to feel the loneliness of all that judging quietly ease. The same mercy can be turned inward, and this may be the most healing turn of all. For we carry an arrow against ourselves more often than against anyone else. Something goes wrong, and the inner judge wakes at once. You should have known better. This is your fault. What is wrong with you? The voice can be relentless and far crueler than we would ever be to another person. We would never speak to a struggling friend in the harsh tones we use on ourselves in a hard hour. We would never stand over someone we love in their moment of failure and list their faults as the inner judge lists ours. There is a strangeness in this that we rarely face. If a friend came to you having stumbled, ashamed and hurting, you would not pile on. You would soften your voice. You would remind them of all they had been carrying, all the reasons the stumble made sense. You would offer them the understanding that lets a person stand up again. And yet to ourselves we offer the opposite, a harshness we would find cruel in anyone else. We have somehow decided that we, alone among all people, do not deserve gentleness. But the Buddha's teaching on causes, which we have already touched, applies here too. Whatever we did from a tangle of conditions, from tiredness and fear and old wounds and limited understanding, from 100 streams we did not choose and could not fully see. The self we are judging so harshly was doing its best inside a situation we have long since stopped seeing clearly. This is not making excuses. It is simply truth. When we understand all that fed a moment, condemnation gives way to something softer. We can look back at our own stumbles with the same mercy we would offer a friend and say, gently, of course you struggled. Look at all you were carrying. This is how the second arrow falls from the hand. We feel the first pain, the thing that actually happened, and we let it be painful, because it is. But we decline to pick up the second arrow. We do not pile blame upon the hurt. We do not interrogate it for fault. We let the pain be simply pain, clean and bearable, and we meet it the way we would want someone we love to be met in their own hard moment. With patience, with kindness, without the cruelty of a verdict. So when difficulty visits, as it will, perhaps we can begin to notice the second arrow in our hand before we drive it home, to feel the first hurt honestly, and then to pause, and to choose not to add the long story of blame on top of it, to stop being the judge of others and of ourselves alike. The Buddha offered this not as a rule to obey, but as a door to walk through, into a life far lighter than the one we burden ourselves with. The hurt that life brings is real, and it is enough on its own. We do not need to wound ourselves a second time, and there is a quiet grace that comes once we stop judging. The world grows less sharp, less divided into the worthy and the unworthy, the right and the wrong. People become simply people, each one moving through a life we cannot fully see, each one carrying more than we know. We become less of a courtroom and more of a refuge, for others and for our own tired heart. The village, after that long winter night, never looked at the quiet man the same way again. But more than that, having seen how badly they could misjudge one's soul, they grew slower to judge anyone. The mercy they finally felt for him spread outward, softening the way they saw each other and themselves. That is what happens when even one verdict is set down. The hand that releases it is free to offer something better. Let us be quiet together for a breath or two. Set down any judgment you may be holding toward another or toward yourself, and let this moment be free of all verdicts. When the quiet has done its work, we will go on. When something hard befalls us, the mind wants more than a cause. It wants a verdict about the whole of life. We do not only ask why this happened. We ask what it means about the way the world is put together. And down through the ages, people have answered that question in a handful of ways, each one a kind of road the mind takes to make sense of its suffering. The Buddha looked at these roads with great care, and he noticed something surprising about them. Each one, followed to its end, can quietly rob a person of the will to live fully. Each can lead, in his words, to a kind of inaction, a giving up disguised as understanding. There were 3 such roads he spoke of in particular. 3 ways of explaining why life unfolds as it does. And though he described them long ago, you will recognize all 3 at once, because we still walk them today. The first road belongs to the person who believes that everything is already decided. Whatever happens to you, this view says, was set in motion long ago and could not have been otherwise. It was meant to be. Your joys and your sorrows alike were written before you arrived, and you are simply living out a story whose ending is fixed. There is comfort in this, and that is why people take the road. When something painful happens, it soothes us to believe it was meant, that it fits into some larger plan we cannot see. We say it to each other often, with kind intentions. Everything happens for a reason. There are no accidents. It was always going to be this way. And in a moment of grief, these words can be a pillow for the head. But the Buddha saw the hidden cost. If everything is already decided, then why lift a finger? Why try to ease anyone's suffering, including your own, if all of it was always going to be exactly as it is? The person who fully believes that all is fixed slowly loses the reason to act with care, to make an effort, to choose kindness over cruelty. After all, the choice was never really theirs. The road that promised comfort ends in a strange paralysis, a life watched rather than lived. The pillow becomes a place to lie down and never rise. The second road belongs to the person who hands everything over to a power beyond themselves. It is all in greater hands, this view says. Whatever happens, happens because it was willed by something far above us, and our part is only to accept. There is a deep humility in this road, and a real peace can be found on it. To trust that one is held by something vast and good is no small thing. But here too the Buddha pointed to a quiet danger. If every event is the will of something beyond us, then we may slowly stop taking up our own share of the work. We may grow passive before suffering that we could in fact help to ease, telling ourselves it was meant from on high, that it is not our place to interfere. The person far along this road can drift into a gentle helplessness, watching hardship unfold and folding their hands, certain that it is all being handled elsewhere. And so the very humility that began as wisdom can curdle into a turning away. The third road is the road of pure chance. On this road, there is no plan, and no hand, and no reason at all. Things simply happen. The universe is a great tumble of accidents, and to look for meaning in any of it is a fool's errand. We are here by luck, we suffer by luck, and nothing we do particularly matters in the vast indifference of it all. This road has its own appeal. It can feel honest, even brave, to stare into a world without guarantees and ask for no comfort. But the Buddha saw where it leads as well. If nothing means anything and nothing we do makes a difference, then effort itself begins to seem absurd. Why act with care in a world of pure accident? Why plant anything? Why mend anything? Why love anything? If it is all just chance, scattering and gathering and scattering again. This road, which began in clear-eyed honesty, can end in a cold and weary shrug, a life in which nothing is worth the trouble. 3 roads, then. All is fixed. All is willed from above. All is mere accident. And the strange thing the Buddha noticed is that they arrive by very different paths at the same place. Each one, held tightly enough, drains the life out of the present moment. Each becomes a reason to stop participating, to stop caring, to stop showing up for the one life we are actually living. The person certain that all is decided, the person certain it is all in other hands, and the person certain it is all random, can each end up sitting on the bank of their own life, watching it flow past, no longer wading in. What unites the 3 is not their answers, which could not be more different, but their certainty. Each has closed the question. Each has decided, once and for all, how the world is arranged, and having decided, each can rest his hands in his lap. The certainty itself is the trap, whatever shape it takes. And this is why the Buddha did not simply offer a 4th and better theory to set beside the other 3. He pointed instead to the freedom that opens when we stop needing any of them to be finally true. Let us explore a small story about this. In a mountain village, The rains failed one year, and the stream that fed the fields ran thin. 3 farmers stood at the edge of their drying crops, and each looked at the same cracked earth, and each said something different. The first folded his arms and said, "This was always going to happen. It was written in the stars before any of us were born. There is nothing to be done." And he went home and sat in his doorway and waited. The second bowed his head and said, "This is sent from above, for reasons we are too small to understand. We must accept it." And he too went home and accepted and did nothing. The third threw up his hands and said, "It is all dumb luck. This year dry and last year wet, and none of it means a thing. Why bother?" And he went home and let his tools rust by the wall. But there was a fourth farmer, an old woman, who said none of these things. She did not claim to know why the rains had failed. She did not know whether it was fate or heaven or mere accident, and she did not waste her strength deciding. She simply looked at what was in front of her, and she walked up the mountain to find where the thin stream still ran, and she began, with her own hands, to dig a small channel to carry what water there was down toward the fields. It was slow, patient work, and her back ached, and the other farmers watched from their doorways and thought her foolish. "The rains have failed," they called to her. "What good is one old woman with a spade against the will of the heavens?" She did not argue with them. She did not try to win them to her view, for she had no view to defend. She only kept digging. And by summer's end, when their fields had withered to dust, her small plot alone was green, and there was grain enough to share. The old woman had found what the Buddha pointed toward all along. He did not ask us to choose the right theory about why life unfolds as it does. He asked us to set the theories down. Not knowing why the rains had failed, the old woman was free to respond to what was actually before her. The 3 farmers, each so certain of his explanation, had been frozen by it. Their knowing was precisely what stopped them. Her not knowing was precisely what set her free to act. This is the quiet teaching hidden in all of this. We imagine that we must first understand why something is happening before we can meet it well. We believe the explanation has to come first. But often the explanation is exactly the chain that binds us. The moment we decide that suffering is fixed, or willed, or meaningless, we have given ourselves permission to stop, to turn away, to fold our hands. Whereas the one who can say honestly, "I do not know why this is happening," remains free, still able to respond to what is here, still able to dig the small channel that turns one corner of the world green. It can seem backward at first that not knowing should be the thing that frees us to act, while knowing freezes us in place. We are taught the opposite all our lives, that knowledge is power, that we must understand a thing before we can change it. And there is a place for understanding, certainly. But the kind of grand knowing we are speaking of here, the sweeping verdict about why the whole of life is arranged as it is, this is not the humble understanding that helps us mend a roof or tend a fever. It is a story the mind tells to feel safe, and the price of that safety is often our own aliveness. The old woman did not need to know the mind of the heavens. She needed only to see that water still ran somewhere on the mountain, and that her hands could carry it down. The Buddha was not against effort or care. Quite the opposite. His whole life was spent acting to ease the suffering of others. What he warned against was the kind of certainty that quietly excuses us from that effort. The theories of why feel like wisdom, but they can be a place to hide. And the humble not knowing that admits we cannot see the whole design turns out to be the very thing that keeps us awake and engaged and alive to the moment we are in. There is something freeing in laying down the need to explain the largeness of life. We do not have to settle, tonight or ever, whether all is fated or all is willed or all is chance. These are questions far too vast for the mind to close, and the trying only tightens us. We can let them remain open. We can hold them lightly as great mysteries rather than problems to be solved, and we can turn our attention instead to the small, real, living thing in front of us, which is always asking only for our presence and our care. The 3 farmers each had their answer, and their answers cost them the harvest. The old woman had no answer, and she had green fields, and more than that, she had a life she was still fully living. She woke each morning to a task she could put her hands to. She did not stand apart from her days, explaining them. She was in them. That, in the end, is what the letting go of knowing offers. Not a better theory, but a way back into the life we were busy explaining from a distance. Rest here a moment. There is nothing to explain just now, neither the small things nor the vast ones. Simply be where you are, in this quiet, where nothing needs to be solved. We will continue together soon. So far we have spoken of not knowing mostly as a relief, a setting down of burdens. But there is more to it than relief. There is a kind of richness in not knowing, a closeness to life that the certain mind never tastes. When we stop insisting that we already understand, the world becomes larger and more alive. Every day holds a question still open. Every person carries something we have not yet discovered. Not knowing, met in the right spirit, is not a poverty. It is an open door onto a life that keeps surprising us. The trouble is that uncertainty rarely feels like an open door at first. It feels like standing in fog, unsure of the path. We want to know how things will turn out. We want the worry resolved, the question answered, the future made plain. And when it will not come plain, we grow anxious and we fill the silence with our fears, imagining the worst because the worst at least feels like an answer. This is one of the stranger habits of the mind. Faced with an open question, it would often rather imagine a disaster than sit with not knowing at all. A dreaded certainty feels more bearable than an honest uncertainty. So we rehearse the bad outcome again and again, as if by suffering it in advance we could somehow prepare for it or ward it off. But the suffering is real, and the outcome is imaginary, and most of what we dread so vividly never arrives at all. We spend our peace on futures that never come to pass. The Buddha understood this restless forecasting of the mind, and he saw that it springs from the same root as all our other troubles, the refusal to let a thing be unknown. Let us explore a story about a man who lived long ago and carried a heavy uncertainty of his own. He had reached a turning point in his life, a great decision before him, and he could not see how it would unfold. He lay awake at night turning it over. He pictured every way it might go wrong. He wore himself thin trying to know an outcome that had not yet arrived. At last, weary and troubled, he went to see an old teacher who lived nearby, a person known throughout the region for a calm that nothing seemed to disturb. The man poured out his worry. He described the decision, the many ways it might fail, the sleepless nights, the gnawing need to know what would become of him. And he asked the teacher, almost pleading, "Tell me, how will it turn out? What should I do?" The old teacher listened to all of it with great patience. And when the man had finished, the teacher said something the man did not expect. He said, simply, "You do not have enough information yet." The man waited for more. But that was the whole of it. You do not have enough information yet. Right now, all you can see is how things appear in this moment. But more will come to light that you cannot see from here. Things will shift. New facts will arrive. The path will reveal itself as you walk it, and not one step before. So why torment yourself trying to read a map that has not finished drawing itself? The man frowned, for this was not the comfort he had come for. "But I cannot simply do nothing," he said. "I have to decide. I have to know." The teacher smiled gently. "I did not say do nothing. I said you cannot yet know the end. These are different things. You can take the step that seems true today with the light you have today and remain ready to see what tomorrow shows you. To act without certainty is not the same as to act blindly. It is simply how a person walks through a life that has not yet finished happening. The one who waits to move until he is certain of the outcome will wait forever, and his life will pass while he stands still." The man sat with this. At first it frustrated him, for he had wanted an answer, and instead he had been told that no answer was yet possible. But slowly, as he walked home, something in him began to loosen. He had been treating his decision as a sealed box with a right answer hidden inside, an answer he was failing to find. The teacher had shown him another way to see it. The decision was not a box at all. It was a living thing, still unfolding, still gathering the pieces it needed. He did not have enough information yet, and that was not his failing. It was simply the truth of where he stood, and there was something freeing in that. If he could not yet know, then he could stop straining to know. He could do the one thing actually available to him, which was to take the next small step with the light he had, and to trust that the next stretch of road would show itself when he reached it. The not knowing stopped feeling like a wall he kept walking into. It began to feel almost like an adventure, a story whose next page he could not read ahead and did not need to. This is the shift the Buddhist path points toward. The unknown future is not an enemy withholding its secrets from us. It is simply life, not yet arrived. We cannot live 3 steps ahead of ourselves, no matter how hard we try. We can only live here, with what is actually before us, taking the next true step. And there is a deep rest in accepting that this is all any of us can ever do. Consider how often what we were once absolutely certain of has quietly turned out to be wrong. Think back across the years of your own life. There were things you knew beyond any doubt 10 or 20 years ago. Convictions you would have defended fiercely. Ideas about yourself, about others, about how the world surely worked. And some of them, perhaps many of them, you no longer hold at all. Life brought more information. The picture changed. The thing you were so sure of softened, or fell away, or turned into its opposite. There is a great teacher in this, if we let it instruct us. For if so much of what we were once certain of has proven wrong, then surely some of what we are certain of right now will prove wrong too. We simply cannot tell which parts yet. This is not a reason to believe nothing. It is a reason to hold our certainties with a lighter hand, with a little humility, remembering that we have been sure before and been mistaken, and will be again. The person who remembers this grows gentler. There is less heat in them, less insistence. They have made their peace with being a work in progress, a person still learning, still receiving the information that has not yet come. Think of how often a hardship we were certain was the worst thing to befall us turned, with time, into a doorway we could not have imagined. A path closed that we had been sure was the only path, and we grieved it, certain that all was lost. And then, years on, we saw that the closing had set us walking towards something we now would not trade for anything. We did not have enough information, in the dark hour, to know what that loss was quietly making room for. Almost no one does, in the dark hour. This is not to pretend that every hardship hides a gift, or to wave away real sorrow with easy comfort. It is only to say that our certainty, in the midst of difficulty, that we already know what it all means, and how badly it will end, is so often simply mistaken. We are reading a map still drawing itself. The Buddhist teachers spoke often of this humility, this willingness to not have the final word. They did not see it as weakness. They saw it as the very ground of wisdom. A mind that already knows everything has stopped learning. A mind that holds its knowing lightly stays open, stays curious, keeps growing until the very end. There is a freshness to such a person, even in old age. They are still being surprised by the world, still letting it teach them, because they never sealed themselves shut with the certainty that they had it all figured out. There is that old line from the Zen tradition again, the one we began with, and only now does its full meaning open. Not knowing is most intimate. To not know is to stay close. The moment we are certain we understand a person, we stop truly seeing them, and a distance opens between us. But while we are still curious, still uncertain, still willing to be surprised by who they are, we remain close to them, near to the living truth of them rather than to our fixed idea. The same holds for life itself. Our certainties keep the world at a distance, pinned and labeled. Our not knowing lets us press close to it, to meet it warm and breathing and full of mystery. Picture two people who have lived side by side for many years. One of them has long since decided who the other is. He knows what she will say before she says it, knows her opinions, her habits, her whole shape, or believes he does. And because he is so certain, he has stopped looking. She has become, to him, a settled fact, and settled facts are not interesting, and so a quiet distance has grown between them without either quite noticing. Now picture the other way. Picture meeting that same person each day, with a little wonder, as though she might still surprise you, as though there were more to her than you have yet discovered. There always is. No person is ever finished, ever fully known. The one who keeps this freshness alive stays close to the people he loves, while the one who is certain he knows them drifts slowly apart from them, alone with his fixed picture. Not knowing, here, is simply love, keeping its eyes open. There is intimacy, too, in not knowing how our own story ends. We will not be told in advance. We cannot skip ahead to see whether all comes right. And while a part of us aches for that reassurance, there is also something tender in walking a road whose turns we cannot foresee, trusting that we will meet each one when we come to it. The not knowing keeps us here, present, awake to the step beneath our feet, instead of living always in an imagined tomorrow that may never arrive in the shape we feared. The man in our story lived out his decision in time, as we all must. Some of it went as he hoped, and some did not, and much of it unfolded in ways he could never have guessed from where he first stood, sleepless and afraid. And looking back, he saw that the teacher had been right all along. He truly had not had enough information. The worry had added nothing. The straining to know had only stolen his rest. What carried him through, in the end, was not certainty about the outcome, which he never had, but the simple willingness to keep taking the next step, trusting the road to show him the one after. So perhaps we can begin to meet our own uncertainties a little differently. Not as walls, not as failures of understanding, but as the natural shape of a life still in motion. We do not have enough information yet. We almost never do. And we can let that be not a torment, but a kind of freedom. The freedom to stop straining toward a future we cannot see, and to turn instead toward the quiet, living moment that is actually here, which has never once required us to know how it all turns out. Let us grow still for a moment. Release, just for now, any need to know how things will unfold. You are here, and this moment asks nothing more of you than to be met. We will walk on together shortly. There are times when we have done everything we can, and still the problem will not yield. We have tried every answer, offered every help, and the difficulty remains. In those moments, a hard question arises. What do we do when there is nothing left to do? The Buddha's own life held such moments, and how he met them has something quiet and freeing to teach us. There is a story told of a time when two groups of people fell into bitter dispute over the water of a single river that ran between their lands. A drought had come. The river had thinned to a shallow trickle where it had once run full, and the fields on both banks were turning brown. Each side accused the other of taking more than its share, of damming the flow upstream, of caring nothing for their neighbor's thirst. The quarrel grew sharp and dangerous, and old friendships between the two banks soured into suspicion. The Buddha, hearing of it, came and sat with them. He did not lecture. He listened, first to one side and then to the other, and gently helped them see the root of the trouble, which was not really the water at all, but the fear and the blame that the drought had stirred up in every heart. For a time the fighting stopped. The two sides agreed to share what little the river offered, and peace returned to the riverbank. It was a good thing to see. But peace, once made, does not always hold. After a while, the old grievances stirred again, and the two sides fell back into their quarrel as if the reconciliation had never happened. Again the Buddha came. Again he helped them find their way back to calm. And again, in time, the quarrel returned. There is another account of a community of his own followers who had fallen into a fierce disagreement, a rift so deep that it threatened to split them apart. The Buddha came to them too, and offered his counsel, and tried to bring them back to harmony. But these were proud and certain people, each convinced of his own rightness, and at last they turned to him and said, in effect, "This is our quarrel, not yours. Leave us to settle it ourselves." And here is the part worth sitting with. The Buddha did not insist. He did not force his peace upon them. He did not stay to argue or to plead. He simply accepted that there was nothing more for him to do, and he quietly withdrew and left them to find their own way through, in their own time. He walked into the forest and dwelt there alone for a while, at ease, while the quarrel ran its course behind him. There is great wisdom in this, and it runs against everything the anxious mind wants to do. When we see a conflict, we want to fix it. When we see suffering we cannot ease, we want to throw ourselves at it harder. We believe that if we only push enough, argue enough, care enough, we can force the resolution. And so when our efforts fail, we are left agitated and sleepless, turning the problem over, unable to set it down, certain that we ought to be able to solve what cannot, just now, be solved. The Buddha showed another way. He acted fully. He gave his help freely, again and again. But he did not confuse doing everything he could with controlling the outcome. When he had done his part, he could let go of the rest. He could sit on the riverbank of a quarrel that was not his to end, at peace, without abandoning his care and without being consumed by it. This is the difference between true engagement and the exhausting grip of needing to fix. One acts and then rests. The other can never rest because it has tied its peace to a result it does not control. So much of our suffering comes from this confusion. We take responsibility not only for our own efforts, which is right, but for outcomes that were never in our hands, which slowly wears us down. We lie awake over the choices other people must make for themselves. We carry quarrels that are not ours to resolve. We strain to fix the unfixable and call our straining love, when often it is only the mind refusing to accept that it cannot control everything. To do what we can, and then to release what follows, is not coldness. It is the deepest kind of peace, and it leaves us with strength to give again tomorrow. There is an old image in the Buddhist teachings of the farmer and the field. The farmer can prepare the soil, plant the seed, water it, and protect it from harm. All this is his to do, and he should do it well. But he cannot reach into the earth and pull the shoot up by force. He cannot make the seed grow faster by worrying over it. The growing belongs to the seed, to the sun, to the rain, to forces far larger than the farmer's two hands. His work is to tend. The outcome is not his to command. And the wise farmer knows the difference, does his tending with care, and then sleeps soundly while the field does its quiet work in the dark. We might learn to hold our own efforts in the same way, giving fully to the part that is ours and releasing our grip on the part that never was. Let us explore a story about a monk who lived this teaching to a degree that astonished everyone around him. In a small village there once lived a monk who was widely respected for the purity and gentleness of his life. People came to him for counsel, and parents held him up as an example to their children. Then one day a misfortune in the village was wrongly laid at his feet. Through a tangle of rumor and mistaken belief, the villagers became convinced that this quiet monk had behaved shamefully, and a small child was left in his care as a result, a child the village believed to be his responsibility. The people who had once praised him now turned against him. They spoke of him harshly. They withdrew their respect, their gifts, their kind words. When they brought the child and accused him, the monk said only 3 words. "Is that so?" And he took the child in and cared for it with great tenderness, asking for nothing, defending himself not at all. For a long while he lived under the weight of the village's poor opinion. He who had been honored was now whispered about. Yet he did not argue his case. He did not go from house to house pleading his innocence or pointing at who was truly to blame. He simply did the thing that was in front of him, which was to care day after day for a small and helpless child who needed him. His reputation, which others had given and others had taken away, he held very lightly. The care he could offer he held with both hands. In time, the truth came to light, as truth often does. The villagers learned how badly they had misjudged him, and they came back, full of shame and apology, to beg his forgiveness and to set the matter right. And when they told him that he was free of all blame, that everyone now knew the truth, the monk said only the same 3 words he had said before. Is that so? No bitterness at the years of wrongful blame. No triumph now that he was vindicated. He had not been clinging to the bad opinion, and so he did not cling to the good one either. He had simply done what each moment asked, and let the rest, the rumors and the apologies alike, flow past him like water under a bridge. When we cannot solve a thing, the temptation is also to take a side, to find the villain, to sort the world into those who are right and those who are wrong. And this rarely brings peace. It usually does the opposite, hardening the division, deepening the very conflict we wish to end. The monk in our story could so easily have made the villagers his enemies, could have nursed his grievance and plotted to clear his name. Instead, he held no enemy at all, and so there was no war inside him to be fought. The Buddha, when he withdrew from the quarrel, did the same. He did not stomp off declaring one side the fools and the other the wronged. He simply stepped back, holding no enemy in his heart, leaving the door open for them to find their own peace when they were ready. There is a freedom in refusing to add our own heat to the fire. When 2 people are locked in anger and we step in taking sides, we have not reduced the anger in the world. We have only added our own to it. But when we can stand near a conflict without being pulled into it, calm and clear, and holding no one as our adversary, something steadies. Our calm becomes a kind of offering. It does not force a resolution, but it makes one more possible, by being one still point in a turning storm. The peace we carry within us is the only peace we have to give. The Buddha spoke to this directly. Among the most quoted of all his words are these: "Hatred is never ended by hatred, but by love alone is it healed." He saw that when we meet anger with anger and blame with blame, we are not putting out the fire. We are feeding it. Each harsh answer becomes fuel for the next, and the thing grows and grows, with no end, because the very means we use to fight it is the thing that keeps it alive. The only way to truly end the cycle is to refuse to continue it, to meet the heat with coolness, to decline gently, to pick up the weapon that is being offered to us. This is not weakness, and it is not surrender. It takes far more strength to remain calm in the face of provocation than to lash back. The one who can do it has found a power that the angry person does not have, the power to not be ruled by what others bring to them. We meet small versions of this constantly. Someone speaks to us sharply, and we feel the urge to match it, to answer sharpness with sharpness, to win. And if we do, the exchange escalates, and both walk away more wounded than before. But if we can meet the sharp word with a soft one, or with a moment of patient silence, often the heat simply has nowhere to go. It cannot sustain itself alone. It needed our anger to keep burning, and we declined to give it. There is a quiet mastery in this that the Buddha pointed to again and again, the freedom of the one who is no longer a puppet pulled by every provocation. This is why the Buddhist path places such value on equanimity, that steady, balanced ease that does not tip over into the heat of taking sides and does not collapse into cold indifference either. Equanimity is often misunderstood. It is not caring. The Buddha cared enormously, walked into quarrel after quarrel to help. Equanimity is caring without being unbalanced by the caring. It is the steadiness of someone who can be fully present to a hard situation, fully engaged, and yet not thrown off their center by it. A steadiness that allows them to keep helping without burning out, to keep loving without drowning. Imagine the difference it would make to meet the troubles of your days from that steady center. Not pretending you do not care, and not being swept away by the caring either, but resting in a balance that lets you respond clearly to what is in front of you and release what is not yours to carry. From that place, you can do a great deal of good, precisely because you are not exhausting yourself trying to control what cannot be controlled. The calm person helps more than the frantic one, in the end, and helps longer, because their peace does not depend on everything going right. A person without this steadiness is at the mercy of the world. When things go well, they are lifted up. When things go badly, they are cast down. They are blown about by every shift in their fortunes, never resting, because the ground of their peace lies outside them, in circumstances they cannot hold still. But the one who has found some equanimity carries the ground of their peace within. The weather of life still comes and goes around them, the bright days and the dark ones, but they are no longer entirely at its mercy. They have something steady to stand on. And from that steadiness, they can reach out a hand to others who are still being tossed about, not from above them, but as one who has simply found firmer footing and can help another toward it. So when we meet the unsolvable, as we all will, perhaps we can remember the Buddha on the riverbank. We can give our help fully and freely. We can offer what we have to offer. And then, when we have done what we can let the rest unfold in its own time, without abandoning our care and without being broken by it. We can refuse to add our heat to the world's fires. We can hold no one as our enemy. And we can rest in the quiet center that remains ours to keep, no matter how the quarrels of the world rise and fall around us. There is nothing to fix tonight. There is no problem you must solve before you are allowed to rest. Whatever remains undone, whatever waits for tomorrow, you can set it gently on the riverbank for now and let the water carry what it will. Be at ease here for a little while. Whatever you have been trying to fix or hold together, set it on the bank for now and let it rest. There is nothing you must solve in this moment. We will go on when the stillness feels complete. Much of what we call knowing is really just memory. We meet this moment, and almost at once we lay over it everything we remember from moments like it before. We think we are seeing what is here, but often we are seeing the past, projected onto the present, like an old picture cast upon a fresh wall. The Buddhist teachers saw this clearly. They understood that one of the great obstacles to peace is the habit of dragging the whole of yesterday into today. There is a phrase that captures this beautifully, a kind of freedom the teachers pointed toward. Freedom from the known. To be free from the known does not mean to forget all we have learned, or to throw away the lessons of our experience. It means to stop forcing each new moment into the old shapes, to stop deciding in advance what this day must be because of what other days have been. It means meeting life freshly, as it actually is, rather than as our memory insists it will be. Think of how rarely we let a thing be simply what it is. A meal is set before us, and instead of tasting it, we compare it to other meals, deciding whether it measures up. A morning arrives, and before it has even unfolded, we have judged it against 1,000 mornings past. We live so much inside our comparisons and our expectations that the actual moment, the real taste, the real morning, slips by almost unnoticed. The mind is so busy consulting its records that it forgets to look up and see what is here. Freedom from the known is simply the willingness to look up, to taste the meal that is actually on the table, to meet the morning that has actually come, rather than the idea of it we brought with us from yesterday. Let us explore a story about two travelers told long ago. They were companions on a long journey on foot, a senior monk and a younger one, walking together toward a distant monastery. The way was hard, and after some days, they came to a river crossing where the bridge had been washed away. There at the water's edge stood a young woman, finely dressed, unable to cross, distressed because she could not get to the other side without ruining herself in the current. Now these two were monks who had taken vows not to touch a woman. The younger one looked away, troubled, and said nothing. But the senior monk simply walked over, lifted the woman gently in his arms, carried her across the rushing water, set her down safely on the far bank, and walked on without a word. The young woman thanked him and went her way. The two monks continued their journey in silence. But the younger one was deeply disturbed by what he had seen. An hour passed, and then two, and he could not let it go. The thing churned in him. At last, unable to hold it any longer, he burst out, "How could you do that? We are not permitted to touch a woman, and you picked her up and carried her in your arms. You broke your vow." The senior monk walked on a few more steps, calm as still water, and then he said, "I set that woman down at the river's edge many hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" The younger monk had carried the woman far longer than the elder ever did, not in his arms but in his mind. The act itself was finished, done, left behind at the riverbank. But in the younger monk's thoughts it lived on, repeated, turned over, judged again and again with every step. He was no longer walking the road he was actually on. He was walking, in his head, beside a river he had already left far behind. This is exactly what most of us do, all day long. The hard conversation ended this morning, but we are still having it at noon, and again at dusk, rehearsing what was said, what we should have said, what it meant. The disappointment happened last week, but we carry it into this week and the week after. We pick up the heavy things of the past and we keep holding them long after the moment that gave them to us has passed. And all that holding has a cost. It fills our hands so that we cannot take up what is actually in front of us. It fills our minds so that we cannot be present to the people and the beauty that are here now. The Buddha taught that this moment, this breath, is the only place we ever actually live. The past is a memory, no longer real. The future is a thought, not yet real. The only ground we ever truly stand on is the present, and yet we spend so much of our lives anywhere but here, lost in a yesterday we cannot change, or a tomorrow that has not come. There is something almost strange about it when we notice it plainly. We are always here, and yet we are so seldom here. The body sits in this room, but the mind is off in last week's argument or next month's worry. We eat without tasting because we are thinking. We walk without seeing because we are remembering. We listen to someone we love while half our attention rehearses what we will say back. Life is happening, the only life we have, the actual minutes of it, and we are mostly somewhere else. The teachers of Zen had a simple remedy for this. No grand technique, only the gentle returning of attention to whatever is right here. When walking, just walk. When eating, just eat. When resting, just rest. To be where we already are turns out to be one of the harder things a person can learn, and one of the most freeing. See how the past shapes even what we expect. When someone has hurt us before, we meet them braced for hurt again. When a certain kind of day has gone badly before, we wake already sure this one will too. We carry forward not just our memories, but the verdicts attached to them, and we hand those verdicts to the present before the present has even had a chance to show itself. The new moment is condemned for the crimes of the old one, and so a person who has wronged us once can never quite be seen freshly again. We have sealed them in their past. We meet the memory of them, not the living person, who may well have changed in ways we will never notice, because we have stopped looking. To be free from the known is to give this moment and this person the chance to be new. It is to set down the woman at the riverbank and actually leave her there. Not to pretend the past did not happen, but to stop letting it crowd out the present. This is a great kindness we can offer, both to others and to ourselves. To meet today without yesterday's whole weight pressing down on it. To let a person surprise us by being different from who they were. To let ourselves, too, be more than the sum of our old mistakes. For we do this to ourselves most of all. We carry our own past failings like stones in a sack, hauling them from year to year, certain that because we stumbled once, we are the kind of person who stumbles. We meet each new chance already weighed down by the memory of the old ones we missed. But the present moment holds no grudge against us. It arrives clean, asking only that we meet it as we are now, not as we were. The sack of stones is one we packed ourselves, and one we are free, at any moment, to set down. It can be hard to believe how much of our heaviness is self-imposed. We tell ourselves we are simply being responsible, remembering our faults so as not to repeat them. But there is a difference between learning from a mistake and punishing ourselves with it forever. The lesson can be taken in a moment and kept. The punishment can go on for years, accomplishing nothing but the slow wearing down of our own spirit. The young monk did not need to carry the woman for hours to learn whatever there was to learn. He could have set the matter down at once. And we do not need to carry our old stumbles for years. We can take what wisdom they offer and let the rest fall away, meeting ourselves each morning as someone capable of beginning again. None of this means the past has nothing to teach. The senior monk in our story had surely learned much from his years, and he drew on that wisdom when he chose, freely and without fuss, to help a person in need. The difference was that he did not carry the moment past its natural end. He learned what there was to learn, acted as the moment asked, and then let it go completely, leaving his mind clear and open for whatever came next on the road. That is the art of it. To take the lesson and leave the weight. To let experience make us wiser without making us heavier. There is a teaching from the Buddha that speaks softly to this. He once compared his whole teaching to a raft, built to carry a person across a river. Once the far bank is reached, he asked, what should the traveler do with the raft? Should he lift it onto his shoulders and carry it with him everywhere he goes from then on, out of gratitude for its help? Of course not. He should set it down at the water's edge, with thanks, and walk on unburdened. The raft was made for crossing, not for carrying. And so it is with all the experiences we gather. They are meant to carry us forward, to serve their purpose in their moment, and then to be set down. We were never meant to haul every river crossing of our lives upon our backs for all our remaining days. We take what served us, and we lay the rest gently down. Imagine moving through a day like that. Each moment met fresh, dealt with, and released. No long trailing tale of this morning's troubles dragging behind you into the afternoon. No tomorrow's worries reaching back to spoil today. Just this, and then this, and then this. Each thing in its turn, each set down when its time is done. There is a lightness in such a life that has nothing to do with our circumstances and everything to do with what we choose to keep carrying. The road is the same road, but the traveler who has set down his sack walks it so much more freely. So perhaps tonight we can practice setting things down, not by force, not by trying hard to forget, but simply by noticing when we are still carrying something the moment has already finished with, and gently opening our hands. The conversation is over. Let it be over. The day's small troubles are behind us. Let them stay behind us. There is nothing from yesterday that needs to be held this evening, and nothing from tomorrow that needs to be reached for. There is only this quiet moment, asking nothing, complete in itself. Let us linger in the quieter moment. Set down anything you have been carrying, from earlier today or from far longer ago, and let your hands be empty and at rest. The road will still be there in a little while, and we will take it up together. If we let go of always needing to know, a fair question follows. When the moment comes to act, to choose, to do something in the world, where does good action come from, if not from certainty? We might fear that without our firm opinions and our sureness, we would be left adrift, unable to act at all. But the Buddhist teachers point to a different source for our actions, one deeper and steadier than the restless, calculating mind. They point to the heart. There is a kind of knowing that is not the knowing of the busy intellect. It does not arrive through argument or analysis. It rises quietly from a settled place within us, and we recognize it less by its reasoning than by its tone. The actions that come from this place have a particular feel to them. They are calm. They are clear. They are not driven by fear or by the need to win. And learning to tell this quiet inner knowing apart from the loud, anxious chatter of the mind is one of the gentlest and most useful skills a person can develop. The teachers describe two very different sources from which our actions can spring. One is agitation. The other is stillness. When we act from agitation, there is a particular signature to it. The chest is tight. The mind is racing. There is a heat, a pressure, a sense of urgency that will not wait. We feel we must do something, now, to relieve the discomfort of the moment. And the actions that come from this place, however justified they seem at the time, so often lead to regret. The sharp word we fire off in anger, the hasty decision we make in fear, the thing we grab at to soothe an anxiety. These spring from contraction, from a self that feels threatened and is scrambling to protect itself. The Buddhist teachers notice that such actions tend to multiply suffering rather than ease it, our own and others. But there is another place we can act from. A place of stillness, of connectedness, of ease. When action rises from here, It does not feel driven or frantic. It feels simply right, aligned, unforced. There is no heat in it, no fear, no clenching. It is the difference between snapping at someone because we are overwhelmed and speaking a hard truth to them gently because it genuinely needs saying. The words might even be similar, but the place they come from could not be more different, and that difference is felt by everyone involved. We have all known both kinds of action, and we can usually tell them apart afterward, even if we missed it in the moment. Think of a time you responded to someone in haste and heat, and how it sat with you that night. The uneasy churn, the wish to take it back. Then think of a time you waited, let yourself settle, and spoke or acted from a calmer place. That second kind rarely brings regret. Even when the outcome is hard, even when the thing we had to do was difficult, there is a cleanness to action that came from stillness. We may feel sorrow, but we do not feel that gnawing shame that follows action born of agitation. The heart knows the difference, and it keeps an honest record. Let us explore a story about this difference. There was once a proud and hot-tempered man, a warrior known throughout his region for his fierceness, who had grown curious about matters of the spirit. He had heard that a certain old monk living quietly nearby was said to be wise, and he decided to go and test him. He strode up to the monk, who sat peacefully in his small garden, and demanded, in a loud and impatient voice, "Tell me, monk, they say you are wise. So tell me at once, what is heaven and what is hell? Show me." The old monk looked up slowly, regarded the warrior from head to foot, and then said, in a flat and dismissive tone, "Why should I waste my wisdom on someone like you? You are coarse and rough. Your voice is unpleasant, and your manner is worse. I could not possibly explain anything of value to a clumsy, foolish man such as yourself." The warrior was astonished. No one spoke to him this way. He felt the heat rise in his chest, the blood pound in his ears. His whole body tightened with fury, and he raised his hand, ready to strike the insolent old man down. And in that very instant, calm and unhurried, the monk said, That is hell." The warrior froze. He understood at once. The blind rage that had seized him, the tightness, the heat, the loss of all his reason, that was hell. The old monk had not described it to him. He had shown it to him, opened it up inside his own chest, so that he could feel for himself the burning, narrow misery of a mind consumed by anger. The warrior's raised hand slowly lowered. The fury drained out of him, replaced by a wave of understanding, and then by gratitude. This old man had taken a real risk to teach him something he could never have learned from words alone. His face softened, his breathing eased. And seeing this change come over him, the monk smiled gently and said, "And that is heaven." The warrior had felt, in the space of a single moment, both places from which a life can be lived. The hell of the agitated, furious, contracted mind, which sees enemies everywhere and lashes out to protect itself. And the heaven of the settled, open, peaceful heart, which has nothing to defend and so can meet the world with kindness. He had not been told about them. He had tasted them both, and he never forgot the difference. This is the teaching the old monk gave without a single explanation. The same situation, the same raised hand, can hold both heaven and hell within it, depending entirely on the state of the heart from which we meet it. And once we have truly felt this difference, even once, we begin to recognize it everywhere. We start to notice, before we act, where the impulse is coming from. Is this rising from the tight, hot, frightened place? Or from the open, easy, settled one? The Buddha placed great value on this kind of self-awareness, this gentle watching of our own inner states before we let them drive us into action. He taught that we need not act on every impulse the moment it appears. There is a space, if we are paying attention, between the feeling and the deed. And in that space lies all our freedom. When anger rises, we can notice it, feel it, and let it be there without immediately obeying it. When fear whispers that we must act now, we can recognize the fear and let it settle before we move. We are not at the mercy of every wave that passes through us. We can wait for the waters to grow still and act from the clear depths rather than the churning surface. This space is easy to lose, especially when we are tired or pressed or stirred up. The agitated mind wants no space at all. It wants to act this instant, to discharge the discomfort, to do something, anything, to relieve the pressure it feels. That very urgency is the warning sign. When something inside insists that we must respond immediately, that we cannot possibly wait, that is precisely the moment to be most careful, for it is almost always agitation speaking, not wisdom. Wisdom is rarely in a hurry. It can afford to wait, because it is not running from any discomfort. The simple act of pausing, of taking a single slow breath before we speak or act, is often enough to let the churning settle and the clearer impulse rise. So much regret could be spared by that one small pause. This is not about suppressing our feelings or pretending to a calm we do not have. The warrior's anger was real, and the monk did not ask him to deny it. The teaching is subtler. It is about learning to feel what we feel, fully, while not being ruled by it. To let the anger arise and pass without letting it seize the controls. To notice the fear without handing it the reins. From that watchful stillness, a wiser action can emerge, one that we will not regret in the morning. How do we know, in a given moment, which place we are acting from? The Buddhist teachers offer a simple guide, and it lives in the body more than the mind. Pay attention to the tone of the impulse. An action rising from agitation carries tension with it, a sense of contraction, of grasping, of pushing against something. An action rising from the settled heart carries ease, even when the action itself is difficult or the matter is serious. One feels like clenching. The other feels like opening. With a little quiet attention, we can begin to feel the difference quite clearly and to wait, when we can, for the clenched impulse to soften before we act on it. The body is honest in a way the thinking mind is not. The mind can spin a clever justification for almost anything, dressing up an angry impulse in the fine clothes of principle and calling it righteousness. But the body does not lie so easily. The tight jaw, the held breath, the knot in the stomach, these tell the truth about where an impulse is really coming from, even when our thoughts insist otherwise. This is why the Buddhist path pays such close attention to the body, to the breath, to the felt sense of a moment. Our cleverness can deceive us. The quiet signals of the body, if we learn to listen to them, are a far more trustworthy guide to whether we are about to act from peace or from pain. None of this means we become slow or passive, forever waiting and never doing. Sometimes the settled heart moves quickly and decisively. The point is not the speed of the action but its source. A firefighter rushing to help acts fast, but from clarity and care, not from blind panic. A parent comforting a frightened child acts at once, but from love, not from agitation. The stillness we are speaking of is not the absence of action. It is the ground from which the best action springs, swift or slow as the moment requires, but always clear, always kind, always free of the heat that leads to regret. The Buddha himself was no withdrawn or passive figure. He spent decades walking the roads, teaching, settling quarrels, sitting with the troubled and the grieving, acting tirelessly in the world. His stillness did not make him do less. It made everything he did flow from a clear and peaceful source. This is the promise hidden in the teaching. We do not have to choose between being calm and being effective, between inner peace and useful action. The deepest calm is in fact the wellspring of the wisest action. The two are not opposites. The peaceful heart is not the one that does nothing. It is the one that does the right thing, at the right time, in the right spirit, because nothing in it is clouded by fear or grasping or the need to win. So perhaps, in the days ahead, we can begin to listen for where our actions are coming from. Not to judge ourselves harshly when we catch the heat rising, for that is simply human, but to notice it gently and to give ourselves the small grace of a pause. In that pause, the churning can settle, and from the stillness underneath, we may find that we already know, more often than we expected, the kind and clear thing to do. The heart, it turns out, was never as lost without its certainties as the anxious mind feared. It had its own quiet wisdom all along. Settle here a moment and feel the body soften. Beneath all the day's agitation there is a still place, a quiet depth under the moving surface, and it is always there. Rest in it now. We will go on together before long. We have wandered a long way together through this single idea, the letting go of knowing, and perhaps a worry has surfaced somewhere along the path. If we give up our certainties, do we not become lost? Do we not drift, aimless, believing nothing, standing for nothing? It is a fair concern, and the Buddhist answer to it is gentle and clear. To let go of knowing is not to fall into emptiness. It is to begin living the question, rather than clutching at an answer. And there is a great aliveness in that, an aliveness the certain mind never knows. The one who must have an answer treats every question as a problem to be solved and then filed away, finished. But many of the deepest questions of a life are not like that. They are not problems with solutions. They are companions, meant to be carried, lived alongside, returned to again and again as we change, and the question changes with us. To live a question well, with curiosity and openness, is a richer thing than to kill it with a quick answer. There is a difference between a frustrated not knowing and a peaceful one. The frustrated kind paces and frets, treating the open question as a wound that must be closed, suffering until it finds relief in some answer, any answer. The peaceful kind rests in the openness itself, content to let the question stay open, even curious about where it might lead. The same uncertainty can be a torment or an adventure, depending entirely on whether we are fighting it or befriending it. The Buddhist teachers did not ask us to stop wondering, to stop seeking, to stop caring about what is true. They asked only that we hold the wondering gently, that we let the seeking be a joy rather than a desperation. To keep asking and to be at peace while we ask is the whole art of it. There is a small teaching from the tradition that captures the danger we are speaking of, and it carries a touch of humor. The story tells of a tempter, a figure who represents all the forces that pull us from peace, and of his attendant, who watched one day as a person came upon a genuine piece of truth. The attendant grew worried. "Does it not trouble you," he asked the tempter, "when someone discovers a piece of the truth?" "Not at all," the tempter replied, entirely at ease. "I do not mind in the least." Because right afterward, they usually make a belief out of it. There is the whole trap, named in a single line. The trouble is rarely that we cannot find truth. The trouble is what we do with it once we have it. We take something true and alive, something we glimpsed freshly, and we harden it into a fixed belief, a possession, a flag to wave and defend. The living insight becomes a dead certainty, and the moment it does, it stops being a doorway and becomes a wall. The tempter is not afraid of truth. He is content to let us find it, because he knows our habit of turning it at once into one more rigid opinion to cling to and quarrel over. This is why the Buddhist path asks us to hold even our truest understandings lightly, with an open hand. Not to discard them, but to keep them alive, to let them breathe, to allow them to deepen and shift as we walk further. The insight that serves us today may need to soften tomorrow when we can see a little more. To grip it too tightly is to stop it from growing, and to stop ourselves from growing with it. Think back across your own years. Surely there are things you once held as unshakable truth that you now see quite differently. Beliefs about yourself, about others, about how life works, that have quietly turned over with time and experience. This is not a sign that you were foolish then or that you are wiser now. It is simply the natural movement of a living mind, taking in more of the world, letting its understanding ripen. And if so much has shifted already, then surely some of what we hold tightly today will shift again. We are still in the middle of our learning. We always will be. There is a deep humility in this, and a deep freedom too. We do not have to defend our current understanding as if it were the final word. We can let it be what it is, our best seeing for now, open to whatever the next stretch of road reveals. This is the very thing the tempter was counting on in that old story, when he let people find their truth and waited for them to harden it into a belief. A truth held lightly stays a doorway. We can walk through it and keep walking toward ever deeper understanding. A truth gripped tightly becomes a stopping place. We plant our flag, we declare the matter settled, and we go no further. The grip feels like strength, like conviction, like standing firm. But often it is simply the place where our growing stopped. The wisest people are frequently the most willing to say they are not sure, to admit they may be wrong, to keep their understanding open at the edges. They have learned that certainty and wisdom are not the same thing, and are sometimes opposites. Let us explore a story about this. A seeker had been traveling a long while in search of wisdom, and one day he came to the bank of a wide river. On the far side, he could see the green country he longed to reach, the place where he was sure his answers waited. But the river was broad and the current strong, and he could find no way across. He sat down at the water's edge, weary and frustrated, and stared at the far shore for hours, turning over every possible way he might reach it. He grew more and more anxious, certain that everything he sought lay on the other side, and that he was failing to get there. After a long time, he noticed an old teacher sitting peacefully on the same bank, a little way off. Hope leapt in him. Surely this wise one would know the secret of the crossing. He hurried over and called out, "Please, I beg you, tell me how to reach the other side of this river." The old teacher looked up and down the wide water, slowly, taking his time. Then she turned to the seeker with a kind smile and said, "My friend, you are already on the other side." The seeker did not understand at first. He looked across at the far bank, then back at the old teacher, confused. "What do you mean?" he said. "The land I seek is plainly over there, across the water. I am here, on this side, unable to reach it." The teacher only smiled and gestured to the riverbank around them, to the grass and the stones and the soft light on the water. "You came seeking peace," she said. "You came seeking a place to rest, a home for your restless heart. And all this time you have believed it lay across the river, somewhere you have not yet managed to go. But tell me, what is it you are looking for that is not already here? The ground holds you. The air is sweet. The river sings. You have been so busy straining toward the far shore that you never once sat down on the one beneath you." And as he sat with her words, something began to open in him. He had spent his whole journey certain that what he sought was elsewhere, across some river, beyond some horizon, always on the far side of a crossing he could not make. And in his straining to get there, he had never once noticed where he already was. The bank he sat upon held its own quiet beauty. The ground beneath him was solid and real. The very peace he had been chasing across the water had been available to him all along, here, in the place he kept trying to leave. This is the quiet truth the Buddhist teachers point toward again and again. We imagine that peace lies on the far side of some answer we have not yet found, some understanding we have not yet reached. We tell ourselves that once we finally know, once we have it all figured out, then we will rest. And so we spend our lives staring across the river, straining toward a shore that always seems just out of reach. But the resting place was never across the water. It is here, in this moment, on this bank, available the instant we stop insisting that it must be somewhere else. Not knowing is not a river that keeps us from peace. The demand to know is the only river, and we can step out of it whenever we choose. How much of a life can be spent this way, always, almost arriving, never quite here? We finish one thing certain the next will bring the peace we are after, and then the next, and the next, forever leaning into a future that never becomes the present. The mind is sure that contentment waits just beyond the current trouble, the current question, the current crossing. But when we reach that far bank, we find the mind has simply pointed to a new river further on. There is no end to it, this chasing, until we see through it entirely and understand that the only place we can ever actually rest is the place we already are. The seeker, by the river, had everything he needed the moment he sat down. So, in truth, do we. So we come, gently, to where this journey has been leading all along. The letting go of knowing is not a loss. It is a homecoming. When we set down the heavy need to have every answer, we do not become lost. We become present. We arrive, at last, on the bank where we always stood. We can hold our questions with tenderness instead of anxiety, carrying them as companions rather than wrestling them into answers. We can let our understanding stay alive and open, ripening as we go. We can meet each day, each person, each turn of the road, with fresh eyes and an unclenched heart. There is a peace here that does not depend on having things figured out. It is the peace of the open hand, the empty cup, the still water beneath the moving surface. It asks nothing of us except that we stop grasping and notice that we are already home. The seeker spent so long trying to cross to a peace that was beneath him the whole time. We need not make the same long journey. We can simply set down the question, just for now, and rest where we already are. And if a question returns tomorrow, as questions do, we can meet it differently than before. Not as an emergency to be solved before we are allowed any peace, but as a companion on the road, walking beside us, asking to be lived rather than answered. The great matters of a human life were never meant to be settled once and filed away. They are meant to be carried gently, returned to, deepened, held with wonder rather than gripped with fear. A life lived this way is not a life of anxious searching. It is a life of quiet, open presence, at ease among its mysteries, at home in the very middle of not knowing. This is what the Buddhist path has pointed toward all along, not a final answer that ends all questions, but a peace that does not need one. Let us be still together, one last time before we close. Feel the ground beneath you, holding you, asking nothing in return. There is no river to cross tonight, nowhere further to reach. You are already here. We will come gently to a close in a moment. Wisdom does not come when we chase it. This is one of the gentlest surprises of the path the Buddha walked. We are taught to believe that understanding is something we seize by force, that if we only think harder, push longer, grind away at a problem with enough effort, the answer will finally give way. But the deepest understandings rarely arrive like that. They come in the open spaces, in the unhurried moments, when we have stopped gripping and the mind has room to breathe. A tight mind cannot see far. When we are anxious, when we are straining, the mind narrows. It contracts around the problem like a fist closing, and in that clenched and crowded state, the very clarity we are reaching for cannot find its way in. Yet let the same mind settle, give it a little space and ease, and understanding moves through it freely, the way light fills a room once the shutters are opened. We have all felt both of these states, though we may never have given them names. There is the cramped feeling of a mind under pressure, when the thoughts come fast and shallow, and we cannot seem to think straight no matter how hard we try. And there is the other feeling, rarer and sweeter, when the mind is rested and open, and ideas seem to arrive of their own accord, easily, almost playfully. The difference between them is not how hard we are working. Often it is the reverse. The cramped state comes from too much effort, too much grasping. The open state comes from a kind of letting be. This is why the answer to a hard question so often arrives in the bath, or on a slow walk, or in the soft moments before sleep, rather than at the desk where we strained for it. The mind needed room, and we had finally stopped crowding it. Think of how a worry behaves late at night. We lie awake turning it over, certain that if we keep working at it, the solution will come. But the mind, cramped and exhausted, only circles. The same thought returns again and again, and each time it feels heavier, more tangled, more impossible. We are trying to solve it in the smallest, tightest room of the mind, and there is no space in there for anything new. And then, often, we let it go. We give up for the night, or we step outside, or we turn to some simple task and forget the problem entirely. And in that loosening, with no effort at all, the answer quietly arrives. It was never hiding from us. We were simply too crowded to receive it. The Buddha understood that the mind has a natural clarity, and that this clarity shines on its own once we stop stirring up the water. A still pond reflects the moon perfectly. A pond we keep churning shows us nothing but our own disturbance. There is an old understanding in the Buddhist tradition that the mind, left to settle, is naturally clear, much as muddy water becomes clear if only we let it stand undisturbed. We do not have to clean the water. We do not have to do anything to it at all. We need only stop stirring and wait, and the mud sinks of its own accord, and the clarity that was always there returns. So much of our trouble comes from our refusal to let the water stand. We keep reaching in, stirring, churning, certain that our frantic effort is helping, when it is the very thing keeping the water clouded. The teaching is not to work harder at becoming clear. It is to stop muddying ourselves and to trust the natural settling that follows. Let us explore a story about this. In an old kingdom there lived an official known throughout the land for his quick and clever mind. He prided himself on having an answer for everything, on never being caught without a ready opinion. He worked from before dawn until long after dark, his thoughts always racing, his days packed so tightly that there was no gap anywhere in them. And yet, for all his cleverness, he had grown joyless and brittle, and the harder problems of his life, the ones that mattered most, only seemed to tangle further the more he worked at them. One day, weary and frustrated, he traveled to visit a hermit who lived simply at the edge of a forest, a woman said to possess a rare and quiet wisdom. He arrived full of his troubles and began at once to pour them out, talking quickly, listing all he had tried, all he had thought, all the ways he had failed to solve what weighed on him. The hermit listened, and then she invited him to sit, and she began to prepare a simple meal over her small fire. The official could not bear the silence. He kept talking, filling every pause with more words, more questions, more clever observations about his own situation. The hermit said nothing. She simply stirred the pot and tended the fire and let the evening settle around them. After a long while, when the man had finally talked himself into quiet, the hermit handed him a bowl of soup and said only, "You have brought a very full room to me tonight." The official did not understand. "A full room?" "Your mind," she said gently. "It is so crowded with thoughts and opinions and worries that there is no space left in it for anything to arrive. You came here hoping I would give you something, but there is nowhere in you to put it. First you would have to make a little room." She gestured to the dark trees and the open sky above them, where the first stars were beginning to show. "Out here, there is space. The forest does not hurry. The sky holds everything and grasps at nothing. Sit with me a while and stop trying to solve anything, and let your crowded room grow as wide as that sky. You may find that what you came seeking was never something I could hand you. It was only the quiet you had not yet allowed yourself." The official sat. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he stopped working at his troubles. He watched the fire. He tasted the soup. He let the silence be. And slowly, without his forcing anything at all, the tightness in him began to loosen, and a few of the knots he had carried for years seemed to ease on their own, as if they had only been waiting for him to stop pulling at them. This is the teaching beneath the story. The clever official believed that wisdom was something to be acquired, added, piled onto the heap of all he already knew. But the hermit showed him the opposite. What he needed was not more, but less. Not another opinion to add to the crowd, but space enough for his own deeper knowing to surface. There is a teaching in the Zen tradition that the mind is like a cup, and that a cup already full to the brim can receive nothing more. The official had spent his life filling his cup and wondered why nothing new could enter. The Buddha spoke often of this kind of spaciousness, of a mind made wide and open and unhurried. He did not mean a mind that is empty in the sense of dull or vacant. He meant a mind with room in it, a mind not so packed and clenched that it has lost the ability to receive. In such a mind, wisdom is not manufactured by effort. It arises by itself, in its own time, the way a clouded sky clears, not because we command it, but because we let the wind do its quiet work. There is great relief in this, once we trust it. So much of our striving comes from the belief that everything depends on our thinking, that if we ever stop working at our problems, they will overwhelm us. But the mind has its own wisdom, deeper than its chatter, and that wisdom needs space to do its work. When we ease our grip, when we step back and let the waters still, we are not being lazy or careless. We are making room for a clarity that our straining had been blocking all along. It helps to remember that the great moments of insight in our own lives and in the long history of human understanding have so rarely come from gritted teeth and force. They have come in moments of openness, of rest, of play, when the mind was loose enough to make an unexpected connection. The grip of effort is good for many things, for labor and persistence and seeing a task through. But it is poor at the kind of seeing that matters most here, the quiet arrival of understanding. That seeing asks for the opposite of grip. It asks for spaciousness, for patience, for a willingness to not know for a while longer, trusting that clarity will come when it is ready and not a moment before. This does not mean the answers always come at once or come in the form we expected. But the spacious mind meets whatever comes far better than the crowded one. It is not so quick to panic, not so easily tangled, not so desperate to seize on the first explanation that offers relief. It can hold a question open, calmly, trusting that understanding will ripen in its own season. And in the meantime it can rest, which the crowded mind never can. So perhaps, this evening, there is nothing to solve and nothing to seize. Perhaps the kindest and wisest thing is simply to let the room grow wide, to unclench, to give the racing mind a little of the quiet it has been denied. In that spaciousness, you may find that you are never as far from understanding as the tight and hurried mind believed. The sky was always there above the crowded room. It only needed you to look up. Let us soften into stillness for a moment. There is nothing to work out and nowhere to push. Let the mind grow wide and unhurried, like the open sky above the trees, and simply rest in that spaciousness. We will go on together when the quiet feels full. We have come a long way together this evening, and now we arrive at the close. We began by setting something down, the heavy need to have every answer. And along the way we found, again and again, that what looked like a loss was really a kind of freedom. The open hand holds more than the clenched fist. The empty cup can receive. The still water beneath the moving surface was there all along. We saw that not knowing is not a poverty, but a closeness, a way of staying near to the living truth of things rather than to our fixed ideas. We saw how our feelings rise from more streams than we can trace, and how this softens us toward others and toward ourselves. We learned to set down the second arrow, to stop being the judge, to hold our views with an open hand. We watched the old woman dig her channel while others stood frozen by their certainties. We sat on the riverbank with the one who gave his help freely and released the rest. And we came, at the end, to the bank we always stood upon, and heard that we were already on the other side. There is nothing now to figure out, nothing to solve, nothing to reach for. Whatever questions you carried into this evening, you may let them rest, just as they are, unanswered and at peace. They will keep. They will be there in the morning, and you can meet them then with fresh and open eyes. For now, there is only this quiet moment, asking nothing of you. Let your body be heavy and at ease. Let the mind grow soft and spacious. Let the breath come and go on its own, like waves upon a calm shore. You do not have to know anything at all. You need only rest, here, where you already are. There is no further to go, and nothing left to understand. Only this, and it is enough. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.